On September 10th, 2025, the world of American politics was shaken. A gunshot rang out at Utah Valley University, and within moments, Charlie Kirk, one of the most recognizable conservative voices in the nation, was gone. The man accused of pulling the trigger, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, was captured within hours. For days, the story seemed simple: a lone attacker, a political target, an open and shut case. But then, Robinson spoke. In court filings, during questioning, and in fragments that slipped into the public record, Robinson hinted at something far more disturbing: the possibility that he wasn't acting alone, that there may have been someone else, a hidden hand guiding him. Tonight, we step into the shadows of this case, not with the noise of headlines, but with the careful eye of an investigator. Who is Tyler Robinson? What did he reveal? And could there really be a mastermind behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk? This isn't speculation. It's a methodical journey through evidence, statements, and unanswered questions. Because sometimes, the most important clues are the ones everyone else overlooks. Before we dive into today's story, kindly subscribe to our Shadow Detective channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Kindly help us reach 300 subscribers, and we believe that with energy and support, we will achieve it. Let's build this community that refuses to stay silent, to stop asking the hardest question of all: but why? Every view, every comment, and every subscriber is a stand against silence, and a step toward truth for those who can't fight for themselves. September 10th, 2025. Utah Valley University was buzzing with energy. Students, supporters, and critics alike gathered in the main hall where Charlie Kirk was scheduled to speak. Security was present, but the atmosphere felt more like a heated debate waiting to unfold than a high-risk event. At approximately 7:15 p.m., the crowd shifted. A sound, sharp, unmistakable, cut through the auditorium. A gunshot, then another. Panic erupted instantly. Chairs overturned, voices screamed, and hundreds rushed for the exits. In the chaos, witnesses recall a figure standing firm, weapons still raised. That figure was Tyler James Robinson. Law enforcement responded within minutes. Robinson attempted to flee the scene, but was apprehended just outside the building. Reports indicate he was carrying the weapon used in the attack, an AR-style rifle, along with additional ammunition. He surrendered without exchanging fire, but not without leaving behind a trail of questions. Who was this man? Robinson, just 22 years old, had no high-profile political ties, no prior notoriety. To the public eye, he was an ordinary young man from Utah. But early digging into his past painted a more complicated picture. Former classmates described him as quiet, reserved, sometimes volatile. Online, traces of political frustration and personal disillusionment began to emerge. As with any high-profile tragedy, rumors filled the void before facts could settle. Some claimed Robinson had been radicalized by extremist groups. Others suggested personal resentment, a life spiraling out of control, culminating in violence. A few even speculated about money, influence, or hidden handlers. But amidst the noise, investigators focused on what was immediately clear. Robinson was in custody, Kirk was gone, and the nation was left reeling from a crime that seemed both sudden and inevitable in an era defined by polarization. The official narrative in those first hours was simple: a lone gunman, a political target, and a grieving nation. But as we'll see, Robinson's own words would soon complicate that story in ways few could have predicted. In the days that followed his arrest, Tyler Robinson remained mostly silent. For investigators, silence can be both a shield and a strategy, leaving more questions than answers. But eventually, fragments began to emerge. During preliminary questioning, Robinson did not provide a clear single motive. Instead, his words came in pieces, part confession, part deflection. Court filings later revealed he had hinted at being influenced by outside voices. Not specific names, not concrete evidence, but suggestions that others may have played a role in shaping his decision that night. Was Robinson trying to lessen his own responsibility? Was he searching for sympathy in the eyes of the jury? Or was there truly someone in the background, someone who encouraged, pressured, or directed his actions? These were not idle questions. Detectives and prosecutors know the difference between a desperate excuse and a credible lead. Still, Robinson's vague references forced investigators to reconsider whether this was simply the case of a lone gunman consumed by anger, or whether the threads extended beyond him. Publicly, officials remained cautious. The district attorney's office framed Robinson as the central figure, the man who pulled the trigger. But privately, investigators pressed harder into his digital history, his communications, and his personal network, searching for proof that his hints weren't just courtroom theater. For those watching closely, one unsettling possibility lingered. Robinson's statements could either be the ramblings of a man cornered by the law, or the first crack in a much larger and darker story. The question remained, was this the isolated act of a single individual, or was it part of something larger, a chain of influence and manipulation that had yet to be fully exposed? As Robinson's words reached the public record, they triggered a wave of speculation. In fragments, never in full detail, he implied that he had not acted entirely on his own, that there were voices, influences, perhaps even individuals, who nudged him toward the path that ended with Charlie Kirk's death. Detectives began to look closer at his background. Who did Robinson speak to in the weeks leading up to the attack? Were there digital footprints, encrypted messages, late-night chats, unusual calls that hinted at coordination? Some investigators noted that his online activity showed a growing discontent, but also traces of dialogue with more extreme corners of the internet. Was he merely echoing the anger of strangers, or did someone seize that anger and steer it toward violence? The public, too, began to draw their own theories. Some believed Robinson was pointing to a political network. Others thought he was blaming shadowy figures as a way to deflect responsibility. But in detective work, every possibility matters. A statement dismissed too early can later prove vital. And Robinson's hints that he might have been pushed, manipulated, or guided couldn't be ignored. Still, there was no smoking gun, no clear evidence of a handler, just a man's words, laced with ambiguity, fueling the possibility that behind the chaos of that night, there was someone else, unseen, untouched, and still out there. It left investigators and the public circling one question: if Robinson was only a pawn, then who was the player? As the investigation deepened, detectives turned their focus to the trail of evidence. Every crime leaves a footprint: the weapon used, the movements of the suspect, the traces of conversations and choices made in the days leading up to the act. First came the firearm. Records showed that Robinson had legally purchased the rifle used in the shooting. On paper, it was straightforward. But detectives asked the harder question: how did a young man with limited means obtain not only the weapon, but additional ammunition and gear? Was this simply a matter of personal planning, or did someone else help make it possible? Next came the timeline. Robinson's travel patterns in the weeks before the attack showed nothing dramatic at first glance, but digital traces suggested late-night searches, encrypted apps downloaded and deleted, and gaps where data seemed to vanish. Investigators wondered, were these the habits of a man plotting alone, or the signs of hidden communication? Then there were whispers of unusual contacts. A handful of phone numbers linked to Robinson were never clearly identified. Some belonged to friends, others to temporary accounts that disappeared shortly after the crime. And yet, for every clue, there was also noise, misdirection. Online forums flooded with false leads, fabricated screenshots, and conspiracy theories designed to distract. Detectives had to separate what was real from what was meant to obscure. Every missing piece, every unexplained call, every deleted message could point to something, or someone hidden in the shadows. But until those pieces could be linked together, the line between fact and fiction remained thin, fragile, and easily blurred. The challenge was clear. Was Robinson's trail the work of a single man covering his tracks, or did it hint at others who preferred to remain invisible? When investigators turn from evidence to motive, they often find the answers are far less concrete. Why does someone take a step so final, so destructive? With Tyler Robinson, the puzzle was far from solved. The prosecution's theory was direct political anger. They argued that Robinson targeted Charlie Kirk for his words, his influence, and his place in America's polarized climate. In their view, this was not random. It was the deliberate silencing of a figure who represented the opposite side of Robinson's beliefs. But Robinson's own statements painted a murkier picture. At times, he hinted at personal grievances, frustrations about his life, struggles that left him feeling overlooked, and resentment toward institutions he believed had failed him. Was the act born out of rage against Kirk alone, or against the system Kirk symbolized? And then came the most unsettling possibility: influence. Robinson suggested that outside voices shaped his choices, that he had not fully acted of his own accord. Was he manipulated by online rhetoric, nudged by people who saw his vulnerability, or simply echoing the anger of strangers amplified in digital echo chambers? Each thread pointed in a different direction. Was this political, personal, or was it something darker? The idea that Robinson may have been a vessel for another person's agenda. Detectives weighed his words carefully. They knew that suspects often shift blame, searching for a way to lessen responsibility. But they also knew that dismissing such claims outright could mean missing the bigger picture. In the end, Robinson's motive remained divided between his own anger and the suggestion of hidden influence. And with every conflicting statement, the case grew less about a single man, and more about whether his actions were part of something larger, still obscured from public view. As the case unfolded, another set of questions began to surface, not about Robinson himself, but about the way the story was handled. Why did certain details emerge only after days or even weeks had passed? Reports of deleted messages, unidentified contacts, and encrypted communications were not immediately shared with the public. Was this simply the pace of a careful investigation, or did officials choose to hold back information to protect the narrative of a lone attacker? Critics argued that authorities may have been too quick to frame the case in simple terms. A lone gunman, a single act of political violence, no larger network, no deeper layers. That storyline was easier to explain, easier to prosecute, and easier for the public to digest. But was it the whole truth? Then there was Robinson's own role in shaping the mystery. By hinting at influence, by suggesting he was not entirely in control, he left the door open to speculation. Could he have been exaggerating, casting blame into the shadows to reduce his own accountability? Or was he revealing fragments of a larger, concealed story? Detectives tread carefully. To accept every word from Robinson as fact would be reckless. To dismiss it all as fabrication could risk missing something vital. In cases like this, the truth often hides in between, somewhere in the contradictions, in the timing of what is revealed, and in the silences that remain unexplained. And so the question persisted: was this simply the work of one man, or was there more lurking just beyond the edges of the official narrative? The case of Charlie Kirk's death remains one of the most unsettling stories in recent memory. At its center stands Tyler Robinson, a young man who pulled the trigger, but left behind more questions than answers. Was this the act of a lone individual, consumed by rage and grievance? Or was Robinson, as he himself suggested, a pawn in a game far larger than the courtroom walls could contain? The evidence is complicated. Some pieces fit neatly into the lone wolf narrative. Others point toward missing details, unexplained contacts, and the possibility of unseen influence. Even now, the truth feels incomplete, scattered across statements, timelines, and the silence of those who may know more than they are willing to say. As investigators press forward, and the trial looms, one fact remains clear. Behind every headline, every press release, lies a deeper struggle to uncover motive, influence, and responsibility. And so we are left with the chilling question: if Tyler Robinson was merely the face of this tragedy, then who, if anyone, stood in the shadows, shaping his path? Until that answer is found, the mystery behind Charlie Kirk's death will remain as haunting as the act itself.